Well, hello. Welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. So this week's blog is entitled Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. It's actually not about the ATF, although it does involve alcohol, and it definitely involves firearms, and to the extent that I smoke and that the former President Ulysses S Grant smoked, tobacco is also involved in this as well. There was an event that took place probably about a year and a half ago where West Point dedicated a statue to Ulysses S. Grant. Obviously, he had gone to West Point, and he had become President of the United States, and they finally got around to unveiling a statue in his honor. I thought it was interesting at the time. I don't know or didn't know that much about Ulysses S. Grant other than the limited amount that we learn in school. Then about probably about maybe 2 months ago, I was having dinner with a good friend of mine, Dan Gwaltney, also a member here at Artemis, and he asked me what I knew about President Grant. And I said, well, to tell you the truth, other than he was a failed businessman and was kind of considered somewhat of a butcher in the Civil War and became President of the United States and left in scandal, I really don't know that much. He said, well, interestingly enough, that's pretty much the extent of my knowledge, too. However, I started watching this miniseries on the History Channel on Grant, and it turns out he was much more of a complex character than we realize. So, having my interest piqued, I purchased the book Grant by Ron Chenoweth. It's excellent. I'm about halfway through it, and I'm learning a lot about this very, very, very fascinating individual. But one of the things that I found really, really interesting is the discussion on his alcoholism. Now, our understanding of alcoholism has changed fairly dramatically over the centuries. We used to consider alcoholism as being effectively a choice, that somebody chooses to imbibe, they become addicted to the sensation, and lives get destroyed and everything else. What we now know about alcoholism is it's much more of a biochemical reaction, and that there are hereditary indicators that predispose people to becoming alcoholics, that it's less of a choice and more of a life condition. And as long as they get exposed to alcohol, the chances of them actually becoming alcoholics are extraordinarily high. Grant's family happened to have a lot of genetic history of being alcoholic, so it's not surprising that he himself ultimately became one as well. That notwithstanding, this study of alcoholism started getting me thinking about firearms. As we know, there are thousands upon thousands, if not millions of individuals that are not predisposed to abuse of alcohol. And as a result of that, even though we experimented with prohibition, we don't ban alcohol outright. The reality is we're not going to completely ban a product because there's a small segment of the population that's predisposed to abuse of that product. Yet, we don't seem to have that same fear when it comes to firearms. We already know the vast, vast, vast majority of gun owners are responsible individuals that would never misuse their firearms. Yet there are few who do use their firearms to engage in oftentimes unbelievably egregious behavior. So the argument for banning alcohol would seem to make the same logical sense as the argument for banning guns. And we already know that the alcoholism or the prohibition didn't work. So the idea of actually banning firearms becomes problematic as well. In any event, I draw these two sort of desperate ideas together. I obviously talk a little bit about General Grant because I'm really fascinated by this guy. In any event, please read the blog. You can access it by going to our website, artemishq.com, going to the upper right-hand corner and simply clicking blog, and that will take you directly there. The blog gets uploaded on Wednesday mornings. Scott, once again, that's for you. Don't just watch this video, all right? As always, guys, I want you to train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.